Now then, let's talk about the Conservative MPs urging the Prime Minister to drop the smoking ban plan, instead raising the legal age to 21 to buy cigarettes. This is fears that the policy is a distraction from more pressing issues. Well, to get both sides of this debate, Christopher Snowdon is Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Lawrence Gurlis is a GP. He's a same-day doctor. Perhaps, Lawrence, I could start with you. This plan, really, that New Zealand has dropped, to say, well, we're going to raise the year every year that people can buy cigarettes. So it would, in theory, get to a point where if you're 26, you can buy them, but if you're 25, you can't, and so on and so on. Yeah. What do you make of the pressure to drop this? It's just nanny statism, some will say.
In general terms, I'm against the nanny state. I believe that people take individual responsibility for their own health. I was against lockdown. I think we've lost faith in big government telling us what to do. Having said that, I do think that smoking is uniquely bad. One of the problems over the last 30 years is we've had so many messages about fats or sugars or alcohol and all other things being bad for you. And I think it kind of blurs the fact that cigarette smoking is, by a long way, the very worst thing you can do for your health and for your body. And without getting into the specifics, I do think a draconian approach on cigarettes is appropriate, and I would keep things in place as they are. The biggest public health measure, the best thing that's done for public health over the last 20 years was to stop people smoking indoors in pubs and restaurants. We doctors can take credit for extending people's lives, but these public health measures are actually more important at the end of the day.
Christopher Snowdon, a draconian approach is appropriate, the words of Lawrence Gurlis. What do you make of that, Christopher?
Well, what are the consequences going to be? Rather than just saying, wouldn't it be nice if nobody smoked, why don't we look at what the consequences of this particular policy are going to be? It's firstly preposterous. It will very quickly be seen to be preposterous as year after year you've got, oh, now it's 24-year-olds can smoke, now it's 26-year-olds, now, and so on. It's daft.
It's confusing. It'd certainly be confusing, and it would kind of weird.
It's weird. It'd be weird for tourists coming to the country. It'd be inconvenient for shopkeepers. And it's not going to stop people smoking. Rishi Sunak talks about creating this smoke-free generation, as if this policy is actually going to achieve that. You've got huge numbers of kids who are smoking cannabis, which has never been legal. You're not going to achieve this through prohibition. And that, I think, is why the government is trying to ram this through before people think about it too carefully.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I mean, another thing, I was in a vape shop this week. I managed to break the screen on my phone, and I had to go into a brilliant shop, actually. A guy runs it, it's great, and he fixed my phone, but he sells vapes as well. But I was kind of alarmed, actually, by all the different flavours. I mean, look, it's consumer choice, it's the market, I understand that. But there were, candy floss, watermelon. These things are clearly aimed at kids, and vapes are... The evidence would suggest, yes, they're safer than cigarettes, but they're still not something that people, I think, should be encouraged to have. Christopher, what do you make of the idea that the government might actually narrow this down to 4 different flavours? I think it would just push things underground. What do you think, Christopher?
Well, it would, yeah. I mean, look, I think there is room for some kind of regulation of packaging and the names that you give different flavours.
What would be appropriate, do you think? What would be reasonable?
Well, I think any line that you draw is going to be arbitrary, but I think, reasonable people could get together and say, look, this is a cartoon of a unicorn or something. This is going to appeal to kids more than to adults. I don't think there's a problem with doing that. The issue is that along with this weird tobacco prohibition, we're also having ran through a whole series of potential bans on e-cigarettes, including a ban on disposables, which a study just came out this week, funded by Cancer Research, not a libertarian organisation, saying, look, this is going to be a real problem. We have 2.6 million users of disposable vapes. The vast majority of them are either smokers or ex-smokers. What are they going to do if you ban these things? The solution here is, in addition to perhaps tinkering with the packaging and the names of the products, is to enforce the laws we've already got. It's been illegal to sell vapes to kids for nearly a decade. And yet kids are buying vapes. Often the vapes themselves are illegal. Yeah. Let's enforce the laws we've already got rather than making new ones that we probably won't enforce either.
I was absolutely horrified, Lawrence, over Christmas, just on vapes, that I was hearing about kids, 15, 16, as a teacher was telling me, a friend of mine, kids sharing vapes, possibly some of them even putting spice in them. This illegal drug that you can buy for £1 or £2, and it makes you sort of in a zombie-like state. there are real worries and real hazards with vapes. What do you make of this kind of idea that, Christopher seems to be kind of on board with, actually, to limit them a little bit?
I see a lot of lung damage and lung illness from vapes, and the concept that it's safer than smoking or better than smoking, I think, is false. The amount you can get nicotine vapes, you're still damaging the heart and the arteries, but the lung damage in particular by inhaling these very hot streams, we see it a lot in practice, and I think it's false to think that moving from cigarettes to vapes achieves anything. And as you say, it's become fashionable by young people, which in itself is worrying.
That's an extremely dangerous thing to be saying on national television. I think you need to back that up. You don't think there's any benefit from switching to cigarettes to vapes? What's your evidence of vapes causing lung damage here? And it's not hot, by the way. It's far
evidence, let him speak,
This
Christopher.
is not backed up by empirical evidence.
My evidence, Christopher,
let Lawrence speak.
In clinical practice. I see it in clinical practice. Christopher, you and I agree on most things, on other subjects, but on this particular, I see it in clinical practice. I see people who have lung illness from excessive vaping. I've seen someone with palpitations from excessive
Just let him speak, Christopher. I promise you I'll let you have a say. Yeah. Lawrence, continue.
Yeah, so I think it's a false dichotomy to say that it's a substantial benefit to move from cigarettes to vaping, and I think
is it not less dangerous? Is it not in some way less dangerous? Is the risk not lower?
You're not getting the tar. You're not getting the tar, so there's less risk of cancers, but you're still getting nicotine. You're still damaging the lungs in other ways. So there's less risk of lung cancer in the long term.
Okay, let's get Christopher's view on this. Christopher, what do you think?
Look, the big problem with vaping in this country isn't anything to do with packaging. It is to do with profound ignorance amongst the public about the relative risks of smoking and vaping, which has led to a ridiculous situation now in which the majority of people, including the majority of smokers, now think that vaping is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than smoking. There is absolutely no evidence for that. There is a mountain of evidence to show the contrary. The government health agencies famously say 95% or vastly safer than cigarettes. It's entirely irresponsible for people to go on the television and basically say that vaping and smoking are essentially the same. If you smoke, you might as well continue smoking rather than giving up by using vaping.
Yeah,
this is the problem the government should be addressing. You said there was no difference between smoking and vaping.
I didn't say that.
The public needs, anybody watching this needs to look at the evidence here.
Okay, Lawrence, what do you smoke? Lawrence, just clarify what, just for our viewers and listeners, Lawrence, just clarify what you are saying. Do you think vaping is safer than cigarettes or not?
Yes, but it has its own dangers, which are quite different, mainly because they're attractive to young people. So yes, it's safer than smoking cigarettes, but it's not totally safe. Nothing is in life.
Okay, well, thanks.
That includes vaping.
Thank you both for thanks for clarifying that, Lawrence. We'll see what happens in the next few days because there is a lot of political pressure on this issue. Thank you to both gentlemen there. Lawrence Scarlett is a GP at Same Day Doctor, and Christopher Snowden is head of lifestyle economics at the Institute for Economic Affairs.